Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So I'm recording this one on the Sunday evening here, starting to put together a couple of items that are going to be coming up on the channel shortly. I did actually record my favorite pickups of 2022 video, so that's the second of the three-part, year in review. Even though it's kind of almost the middle of the month, I figured I would have that done. There's only a handful of items that I think are going to come in. None of them are really going to impact that top group. I do actually have one of the piles here with me, so I'll do a quick sneak preview. Nope, that's it. Those of you who are familiar with who've seen any of the pickups are going to have a pretty good idea. You're going to be able to figure out a lot of them very easily, just because of the nature of the kind of cards that I tend to favor and that kind of a favorites. Again, it's not most expensive, and it's not rarest. It's what my favorites are. Although there are some rare cards certainly on there. Now, I thought I'd do a little bit of a Sunday video here that's a little bit of a mixed bag. Now, obviously, one of the things, as I mentioned, is I'm recording a couple of those year-end reviews ones. The other one is going to be based on the channel itself, so I kind of have to go through a bunch of content. I don't think I'm going to get quite to the runtime of 2021, but it's going to be pretty close. But we do have a record number of videos in 2022, so that's actually pretty good. So not too bad from that regard. The other thing that I was kind of thinking about as I was going through it is that I was actually surprised that I was able to have even more videos than last year, considering that a whole bunch of them were actually pickup videos. I was actually doing pickup videos every single week in 2021, and it wasn't quite the case in 2022, even though still a number of cards came in. Now, one other thing I want to mention real quick, just as a point on the channel itself, is that the live stream this upcoming week, so I'm recording this now with plenty of lead time, is that the live stream coming up this week is actually going to be on Saturday night. And the reason for that is that some work stuff has gotten in the way. I'm going to be working on some stuff through Friday night and the Saturday morning, so that's going to kind of keep me busy. So I'll move things over one more day on Saturday evening. I think I'll do the same start time as before, 8 p.m. Eastern, so I'll kind of get together with some of the folks and see if anybody wants to pop on. And we'll figure all that out. So I want to make sure I figured that out in advance, just made up my mind. So I'm going to do Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll figure out the rest of the logistics in the coming days. Now, with that said, I have a couple of things that I'm going to piggyback off of. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the points that I brought up in the live stream and take advantage of it. And also, I did get an Amazon package in the mail, so I got a copy of Lacuna Coil's Comalies XX, which I don't know if you're familiar with this band, but they've actually been around for quite a long time. And this is the 20th anniversary of the original Comalies album that they made. Now, this is actually something interesting because it got me thinking about one thing that I kind of alluded to on the live stream. And it's one of those things where sometimes stuff on the live stream occasionally will lead into another video. And that's kind of what makes it fun for me, because it does give a little bit of inspiration as far as that's concerned. But it does create a lot of derivative content. And that's kind of the point that I was getting at when I was talking about one of the elements in the video, is that I forget the way it was phrased, but basically it was the question of, why do we get so many of the same, channels creating the same kind of videos or talking about the exact same topic over and over and over again. And one of the points that I made was really simply what it comes down to is market research, if you will, consistently tells you that these topics are the ones that tend to hit and get the most amount of views. And what videos get the most amount of reaction? Well, unfortunately, a lot of negative stuff, talking about, the topic of the day, the topic of the moment, because when people do the video on that, it tends to get a lot more attention. And generally speaking, that's kind of the idea that a lot of people do YouTube for. Not everybody, just to be clear, but a lot of folks do want to get that attention, or they want to be able to piggyback off of it while it's the hot and trendy thing. Now, one other thing I kind of wanted to mention to you, the reason why this one also kind of played into that storyline, I removed the plastic here just to be able to show you something. So it is the 20th anniversary edition, like I said. But when a band has been able to do 20 years, in this case, this band has actually been over 20 years, but Comalies was their biggest album. Now, when a band has an anniversary like that, there is a tendency to take advantage of it and be able to do a re-release, a special edition, which in effect this is. But in this case, they decided to take a little bit of a different angle on it. So instead of just doing like an acoustic version and then maybe a remastered version of the original, which are perfectly valid options, what they decided to do is they decided to do a new version that was deconstructed, remade. So I don't know if you'll be able to read that. I'll try to help you. Reconstructed, remade, and basically modernized. So brought up into the 2022. So in the year 2022, what did they say? And transported into the year 2022. Re-recorded. So the thing is, the band actually went and took the original album, took the original lyrics, took the original everything else, and most of the band members, the lead singer and several of the band members are still the same as before, but what they were able to do is take their original ideas and then redo them in their more current style based on what they're up to these days. So, I'll show you quickly the inside of that. The vinyls are actually separated out from all of it, so nice presentation, nice package. Now I'll have to take a little bit of a closer look through this because apparently there's also the CDs inside. So I'll have to take a peek and see where that is hiding. Oh, I see it. So there you go. Quick editing job in there. Comes with a CD as well. which I think is a great thing, especially for, you know, somebody who wants to take advantage of the multiple versions that you can have on it. And that's a bit of a special edition. But what you end up with is you end up with a reimagined version of the original album, but from the original band, with the original lyrics and everything else, and modernized into the current style. But in reality, if you think about it, they're reiterating on their own work, if nothing else. And again, that was the same idea. It's you could actually take an original piece of work and you could rework it, or you could put a little different twist on it. And that brings me back over to the topic about the, you know, reusing the same topics over and over again, or taking your own take on the topic. Now, I think nobody is in favor of taking simply the same idea, you know, basically watching a couple of people's videos and taking the exact same bullet points and repeating them over and over again. That really isn't putting much into it. But putting your own spin on it, or adding some experience that you may have to be able to bring to the table, I think is perfectly valid. But what it really comes down to, and I think where the main complaint was, not even from that perspective, I think the main complaint was, you know, why do I keep seeing all the same topic over and over again in my feed? I don't care about this. And when it came down to, and kind of what we alluded to in the live stream, and part of the thing that I have a lot of fun with is that, you know, it doesn't matter what you're saying from that perspective. I can appreciate and respect it, and it may be exactly what your thoughts are on it. But I'm back to, it doesn't matter what you say. It only matters really what people do. And what people do, and the example I gave when I talked about it a little bit, is that people will say, like, oh, no one cares about this stuff. It's like, tell it to the views, man. I laugh because it's one of those things where I'll look at it and I'll hear the same people over and over again. They'll say, like, well, you know, collectors, we don't care about this. And I was like, I go look at the comment section, and it seems to be the collectors who spend a lot of time complaining about these things. And they watch all these videos, and they comment on several of them. And that was one of the things that I kept pointing out. And again, to each their own. And I can't blame the content creators, though, for doing it, because it works. One of the points that I made is that you could take the same video and adjust certain elements of it, and suddenly it draws a bigger audience, even if it's the exact same topic that people have already touched on, because in that moment in time, that's what people want to shoot for, and that's what they want to talk about, regardless of what they tell you, or regardless of what they say. Because some people just hate watch it. They want to get mad over and over again, and they want to watch the same thing as many times as possible until it runs its course, and then we move on to the next thing. The next train wreck, whatever that's going to be. And obviously this past week it was the PPP loans, as well as, you know, PSAs trying to get Bench Clear Media to sign an NDA. Those were the two topics that, you know, got quite a bit of buzz during that moment. And I understood. And it was one of those things, that's why I decided to make the video on it. However, I could have very easily, and I mentioned it in the live stream, is like, look, all I would have had to do is take the exact same video that I made and done a more sensationalistic slant on it. I didn't have to change basically one line of the video, maybe add one line at the beginning. You know, put a little thumbnail together, show Jeff Wilson on it, blown up, take up most of the screen, you know, make him look demonic and make him look like the devil, and say, you know, is Jeff Wilson a fraud? Question mark. And then at the beginning of it, you say, like, actually, I don't think he is. And then these are the reasons why, etc., etc. And then just play out the rest of the video basically the way I did it. It's like, is PSA trying to control Bench Clear Media? Question mark. And then say, no, well, actually, they're really not, and these are the reasons why, and then make the rest of the video. But people would have clicked on it, and it would have been the same video, and otherwise would have been the same video, but they would have clicked on it. And Bench Clear, in fact, did a video about this, asking, why do people have more interest in the negative version of it? And it seems to be an element of human nature. For better or for worse, it does tend to be that people do want to look at the car crash. You know, they're hoping that no one's hurt, but they are, you know, there's a little bit of excitement they get when they're driving by, so they do the rubbernecking thing where they can't look away. They have to look and see what's going on and see what's happening. And that tends to play out over and over again, and it's one of those things. Now, truthfully, I have no interest in judging it, but it's just one of those things that tends to play out. And all I have to do is go back in my own channel, not that long ago, only a couple of weeks ago, where I had that little mini saga with the Behind the Card documentary, where I did a review on the Behind the Card documentary, and that specific video, because I happened to be one of the first people to do a review at that time, the video actually did very well for my channel. But funny enough, when the director came in, started posting, spamming comments and doing all that stuff, and then came back with me, and I had that whole issue where, you know, they were trying to get me to interview them, inviting themselves onto the channel, and I decided to make my rebuttal video where I took a little bit of exception to their tone, so to speak. Well, guess what? The second video did get less views than the first video. But the second video actually had way more watch time. More people stuck around to watch the second video than they stuck around to watch the first video. And not a little bit more, substantially more. So in reality, the second video, the more negative of the two, the first video, I had my issues with the documentary, but I don't feel like I went too hard on it, to be honest. The second video was much more negative because now I was irritated. Now you got 3 a.m. ornery Carlos, which, by the way, if you watch the Friday live stream, it's basically Friday Carlos and most other days of the week Carlos. Usually I try to temper a lot of these regular videos, a little bit more than that. But truthfully, the second video, you know, with this more negative tone, was much more well received, so to speak, which is funny. It's kind of the way that kind of thing tends to work out. However, and this is where I kind of pointed out, is that there are mechanisms to play. People talk about, they complain about the way that some of this stuff gets presented. But if we're being truthful, I got 2 videos out of it. I did the original review, which was planned as just a standalone, and then based on the circumstances, I did a rebuttal video based on what was presented to me. But I could have totally milked that much, much more than that. I could have made the second thumbnail way more sensationalistic and, again, played out the exact same video, and it would have been even more successful, probably, than the first one. And in addition to that, as soon as the second one happened, not long after, the director who had communicated to me through Instagram blocked me on their Instagram. Like, I didn't respond past the point of the stuff that I went through in the video, but then they blocked me. I could have made a video talking about them blocking me. I could have made it into a whole dramatic thing. I didn't care. I wasn't going to talk to the guy anyway, so it made no difference to me. I mentioned it on live stream just as kind of a point on the overall, the way it was received in the overall discussion point. But I just thought it'd be very funny. Like, 100%. If I had made another video talking explicitly about that, and it's like, well, clearly, you know, they're trying to block dissent, and they only want positive things, and all this, and this. I could have 100% milked this for 1, 2, 3 more videos easily, and we're seeing that. You know, in a lot of these spheres, when we're looking at a lot of this content, we're seeing folks that like keep stacking up. It's the same characters over and over again, and the reason you're getting the same characters over and over again is because it draws. That's the only reason why. And that was kind of the point I made with the PPP loan / bench clear PSA video, is that when it came to the loans and everything, the topic itself is pretty dry. Most people don't really care about it beyond the point that we stuck Jeff Wilson's name on it. Sticking Jeff Wilson's name on it made it a lot more interesting to a lot of other people because the kind of likely possible fraud that was brought up, he probably would be on the lower end of likelihood that it was actually fraudulent activity. But it didn't matter. People are already predisposed or pre-inclined to assume the worst of it because it's Jeff Wilson and we all hate Jeff Wilson. That's the, or at least that's the narrative that we're going to go with. So because everybody hates Jeff Wilson, therefore there is a segment of the populace worth, whether he did anything wrong or not, want him to have done something wrong so that they can get their pitchforks and torches going. But again, we're deferring back to the negative thing. The great irony of this, and this is the part that makes me kind of entertained, I get a kick out of this, is that the same people who spend the most time being angry at these things are the same ones who are like, you know, we collectors need to take the hobby back. I love that catchphrase. I love the line because the decline in the market technically should flush out most of the investors. So in reality, you, the collectors, should already be in the process of getting what you want, but you've never been angrier. And that's the part that makes me laugh. That's the part that I get a kick out of. Theoretically, you're getting everything you want. And truthfully, if the market continues to decline on a lot of these sports cards, that'll flush out all the investors. That'll flush out a lot of that. It'll decrease the prices on a lot of these things, and you will get what you want. But you're still mad. Now, here's the truth. I've been in the hobby a long time, and I'll tell you my theory, my thought process. Even if you were ever fully successful, all the villains of the hobby ever go away. You would then just turn on each other. You would find something new to complain about. You will never be happy. If you cannot find a way to enjoy or be happy with your current collection, with your current space in the hobby or whatever it is, you're never going to be. There's nothing that anyone can do. You know, you can snap our fingers. PSA and all the third-party graders are now operating perfectly. Or maybe third-party grading is no longer required or necessary. You'll find something else to complain about. The manufacturers could have perfect quality service, amazing value for the price. You could rainbow, sunshine, unicorns, the whole 9 yards. You'll find something else to complain about. Because you can't help yourself. People gravitate towards the negative. They do it every single time. And that's why it's kind of interesting for me as kind of a person who observes it and then also talks about it on the live stream, and we do that. Because on the live stream, obviously I've got the people that are in the panel that we're talking about these things back and forth, and they've got their own experiences and opinions they can bring to the table. But I do have a little bit of a cynical approach to the hobby, but that's only because I've observed it. I'm watching the same people make the same argument year after year, decade after decade. And not necessarily the same individuals, but I'll hear the same phrasing. Because I heard people complaining in the 90s. I heard people complaining in the 2000s, the 2010s, and now the 2020s. And it never changes. There's always something wrong with the hobby as far as those people are concerned. And even as things change and we modify certain elements of it, they're never going to be happy. They're happy being unhappy. And that's the fun part. But this time around it'll be different, if we can get rid of those evil investors, if we get rid of those horrible people that are trying to get money out of this hobby, then this time it'll fix everything. I kind of doubt it. But again, that's just kind of my opinion. Now, it's not 3 a.m. ornery Carlos. It's kind of a cynical, nearing midnight Carlos. So there you go. Yet another variant to add to the variations that we have. But that's kind of just some thoughts that I had based on a little bit of thinking back to some of the topics from the live stream. And I just found it interesting that we find ourselves going around and around in circles and really ending up kind of in the same place that we usually end up at, which is always kind of interesting for me. That all said, let me try to kind of bring it back around on this. I'm not going to tell anybody, in the same vein that I'm not going to preach morality to anybody, because that was one of the points that I brought up on the stream, is I'm not interested in preaching morality. If you're upset by something, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to argue against it because at the end of the day, I can't argue against your emotional response to something. That is what it is. If you're mad about it, you're mad about it. If you're not, you're not. If you're sad about it, you're sad about it. That's up to you. The only thing I can say is that I think you really do have to really reflect and see what it is about whatever that is that's making you angry or upset or whatever. Is it actually the issue in question, or is it a situation where you would have found some fault regardless? Because I do find that a lot of the collectors that I deal with and talk to, they can't really rationalize or really explain why they're upset about some of these things. They just have a visceral reaction. And once the visceral reaction happens, the logic goes out the window. It doesn't matter, whether it makes sense or not. It's just, this is the visceral reaction. This is how they feel. And that's kind of what I saw play out a lot with the whole loan thing, is that in the search for a villain, it didn't matter whether they were actually a full-fledged villain or not, or whether they were pretty much just falling in line with what a lot of other people were doing. I will also give some credit, and I'll include a link to it in the description for you. Like I said, I generally don't watch too much stuff from BenchClear, but I did when I was kind of following up to see if there was anything new on the PSA thing. I did double check and saw that, I think Hobby Hotline, some of the episodes now end up on BenchClear. So I'll link you to the last Hobby Hotline. And I think you had John Newman and Victor, Rookie Card Specialist, and Erica from Love What You Collect. I want to make sure I credit all three of them. So they started off the show, and right off the bat they were talking about the whole PPP loan thing. So again, if you don't care about it anymore at this point, I totally understand, but I want to include it into, because they had a discussion about it, and had a little bit of a chat about it from that perspective. It's always good to get other perspectives if you are still interested in the topic. And if you're not, that's perfectly fine. But it was the topic du jour this past week, so that's why I wanted to make sure we covered it. But again, hopefully from the context of this conversation, and I kind of rambled around a little bit, I had a couple of specific thoughts that I wanted to hit on, and I did. But more than anything, what I really want you to get across from this is that I understand why stuff tends to get repetitive during these cycles. And the real reason behind it is honestly attention and views, partially. And also, occasionally, sometimes people do think that they have another element they can add to it, or a little bit of a clarification. I'm more than happy to be accused of, playing into it as well, because at the end of the day, I choose which topics I want to touch on in the channel. And one of the things that has been clear over time is that I'm not going to touch on everything, because honestly, not everything interests me. For this one, the topic itself was less interesting to me than the reaction to it. And this is kind of the reason why I say I took a different angle on it. That's why I started off with the explanation about this. They could have, as I said earlier, they could have just chosen to do, a live album. Take some of their previous stuff and throw it in there, and then there you go. There's your 20th anniversary. Or they could have done a remaster version and just called it a day. Or they could have done an acoustic version of all the different songs and done that. They actually chose to reissue and re-release it and actually re-record it. And they went into their style, which has actually changed slowly over time, even though the band members, the singer that was involved in this is still with the band. And I believe a couple of the other band members are also still with the band from the time of Comalies, the original. But in the 20th anniversary edition, they went and redid their entire album in a style that is more current to kind of the style that they're having in their more recent albums and now, which I thought was a really great idea, but it requires additional effort. So it's one of those things where it's very easy just to regurgitate what you've already done, or just like put a little mini twist on it and call it a day. What I like to do oftentimes with a lot of these topics is, if it's a press release or something, that's easy. You read the press release, give some thoughts, and call it a day. But if I do find that in the course of reading people's reaction, reading comments, and following through with it, I feel like there's some nuance missed, or some opportunities to understand something a little bit better missed, I hopefully try to add a little bit to that piece of the conversation. Whether people agree with that or not is a completely different issue. And unfortunately for me, I don't seem to do sufficient kind of things and fully taking advantage of the clickbaity nature of YouTube and really maxing it out. I gotta have more of those evil thumbnails. That would really do it for me, I think. And a couple of the clickbaity titles, I think, would work for me. But in reality, I'm not too worried about that. I think I'm very comfortable that with the videos I make and the style in which I make them, there is an audience for that I think prefers me not spending all my time yelling at the screen. I could, I suppose, but I can't feign that level of outrage because I don't really feel it, and it's not there within me. But at the same time, I like to try to look at some of these things through a slightly different perspective and not just immediately go to the visceral reaction side of things. Whether that works or not, that's something I leave up to the viewer to decide for themselves. But that's the whole thing with derivative works. Unless you're truly creating something original, which few of us are, you are basically playing off of something else, or you're reacting to something else, or you're looking around and seeing like, what are people talking about? And then, okay, do I have any thoughts that I feel like I can throw in the ring here? And that's what a lot of us end up doing. Some more successful than others, but that's really what it comes down to. But if you do question ever why you see such repetition in certain topics, that's really the reason why. It's because, at least for that moment in time, it works. It might not stand the test of time, but for that moment in time, it is a proper encapsulation of that moment, at least in the sports card YouTube side of the world. But anyway, with that said, I'll include a link to the episode of Hobby Hotline from the Bench Clear side, and I'll actually include a link to Comalies if you guys are familiar with this band, Lacuna Coil. If you're not, whether you are or not, I'll include a link to it if you want to check it out for yourself. Go listen to it on Spotify or something. I thought they did a really good job with it, especially some of the rethought and remastered tracks. But anyway, that's it for me. Hopefully in that rambling mess, we got to some kind of a point. Whatever it is, I have no idea. I think the point is that Tom Brady's evil. I think that was the point I was trying to get at. So hopefully you got that from this video. Anyway, more videos coming up on the channel. As I mentioned earlier, the next live stream, at the time I'm recording this one, the next live stream will be happening on the Saturday. So that will be Saturday, December the 17th. So it'll be the 17th instead of the 16th. And I will make sure to include a community post or something in the channel just to remind you of that, because I do have to kind of move off of the Friday. The week after that should be back to the Friday, although we're going to have the Christmas Eve, although we could do Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. Actually, I'd be kind of curious, right here at the tail end. If you made it to the end, by the way, let me know if you did, because I'd be kind of curious. Would you want to see another Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve set of live streams like last year? Because in order to do that, it would have to be on the Saturday night instead of on the Friday night. So I'd be kind of curious if you wanted to do it that way, or just stick to the regular Friday, do it on the 23rd and then on the 30th, respectively. I'll try to invite some of the folks that haven't been seen in a little while and see if we can get them to join in and hang out at least for a little bit. Obviously, it's the holidays. I'm not going to expect anybody to stick it out for the full time, but we'll see how that kind of thing plays out. Anyway, so like I said, more videos coming up on the channel. The live streams, we'll figure out the schedule as we go along here into the holidays. And then in the new year, it'll be back to the normal time slot. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.